Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, October 26, 2017. And, well, I don't even know what to tell you. Let's see. Oh, I have a couple of emergency messages popping up on my screen that's not running the show, so that's okay. Seems to be going all right this morning, though. Made it back to the computer just in time, and I guess we probably, actually, maybe just not in time. We were maybe 10 seconds late in starting the show. That's crazy, everybody. What are we going to do? How are we going to catch up? Well, I know, I got an idea. We'll eliminate Greg Dworkin from the program, and that way, well, at least for today, and then we'll catch up with things. Yeah, okay. All right, I get you. Look, I'm not interested in opening this application, other computer. I'll have to deal with you during the break, and just keep pressing the shut up and go away button on my emergency thing here. We're ready to roll. There's plenty of stuff happening this morning on Twitter. I guess the biggest news of the morning on Twitter is Mark Halperin. Turns out to be kind of a dick. That's what it says. Mark Halperin this morning facing sexual harassment charges. Do you remember when we used to say it's sexual harassment? I guess back in the Anita Hill days, we hadn't decided how American reporters should say sexual harassment on the air. And it's a legitimate pronunciation, I guess. It just happens to have gone away for whatever reason. That's what I'm thinking of this morning. There's a lot of weird, quick hit stories happening in the last day or two. I was just reminded of this one. This one happened yesterday. Just throwing it out there. The brother of the Las Vegas shooter, and when I remember, I like to adhere to the policy of not bothering to repeat the shooter's name. Anyway, you remember the guy who said that he was shocked and appalled, of course, as most people would be, to find out that their brother is a mass shooter, and said it came out of nowhere, and like you and I were a little bit puzzled because we said, weren't their father, as it turns out, I mean, it wasn't like I remembered it, but the news told me, and you got to believe the news when the news tells you, that his father was a notorious bank robber. That's a pretty dated statement, right? A notorious bank robber. I don't think we do that anymore. Notorious anything for bank robbers. Anyway, his father had been on the FBI most wanted list. That's how notorious he was. And I was a little puzzled as to how that could possibly be the case if, well, how do you say it's out of the blue if your dad was on the FBI's most wanted list? Well, okay, the sons don't always do the same things that the fathers do. That is true. And, the situation has changed. The brother of the shooter has just been arrested himself on child porn charges, which always, shock and disturb. And I although sometimes I think that's the intent. They're out there sometimes just to shock and disturb, but very frequently, of course, these things do happen. And just like sexual harassment in an adult setting, I guess we have to take these charges seriously because the inclination is to dismiss them mostly because people don't want to think about that happening. And certainly people don't want to think about it happening to somebody who's a celebrity. This guy's not a celebrity, but I'm thinking of the Penn State cases. They didn't. I wouldn't necessarily have said that Sikorsky was a celebrity, but I guess in football circles he was. I don't know. It's just one of those things that people like to dismiss out of hand, even though it's a serious problem and it needs to be viewed seriously. But just a weird, development. Doesn't change anything over there, but it does color my understanding of, gosh, this aberrant behavior is so out of the blue. My father was on the FBI most wanted list. He didn't, of course, come out and say, for instance, I'm into child pornography. That's bad news. But still, it surprises me that my brother would have done this stuff. I don't know. It's just it's a wild card that's out there. Isn't the wild card I meant to start with when I said I had some interesting stories. Like I said, I had that one about Mark Halperin, but I don't have Pocket open yet because I'm so disorganized this morning. But I do have the story. I'm fairly certain I put that one aside because it's pretty major. But who knows? Oh, yeah, there it is. Everything's disguised in my Pocket today. Nobody is. I guess the pictures aren't downloading fast enough, so I have to scan around. Here's the news from CNN. Fitting enough. 5 women accused journalist and Game Change co-author, that's how he gets credited in his headlines now, Mark Halperin, of sexual harassment. Well, that's a game changer, obviously. And best tweet I saw this morning on that subject was Slugagels, our friend Andrew, just tweeting. Did I put this one aside? I don't know. I retweeted it, certainly, and that's the other thing I have to open up is all my list of tweets, because that's where the news happens for me in the morning. But Slugagels tweeting, "This is good news for John McCain," which that's some gallows humor there, man. That really... So, in case you're not following Slugagels, Sluggahjells, he's been on the show a couple of times. A lot of people had falling outs over the primaries with him, but always worth hanging on to. Andrew Jarrell Jones he's a verified guy on Twitter, so you know it's worth following him. That's pretty funny. This is good news for John McCain. Ow. Anyway, yeah, 5 women have accused Mark Halperin, another sort of surprising situation. I don't know. I guess maybe it's a nice thing that I'm surprised every time. Like, I think the best of people, and I really don't. It's a disguise. I think almost everybody is a disgusting sleaze. I don't know why I'd be surprised about these things. What's the story? Well, he was in a powerful position at ABC News. Apparently, these 5 women say they shared with CNN their previously undisclosed accounts, and others who did not experience the alleged harassment personally but were aware of it. And that's really, I guess, the disturbing part. I know in this country, obviously, you're innocent until proven guilty, etc. Part of the real disturbance of sexual harassment is how long people are able to remain floating around in power and continue to harass people in many cases. I don't know if that's the case with Halperin or not. And I don't know I'll read the story. Sexual harassment, of course, is sexual harassment. And trying to differentiate between different kinds of sexual harassment is probably not a good idea for somebody like me, the lay person, just walking around trying to decide whether or not, it makes sense to differentiate between, what would we say, magnitude of the crimes, etc. I think that's better sorted out in another forum and not with me directing the discussion. I don't believe I've been the subject of sexual harassment, and I'm blind to a lot of things. I think I would probably remember that, but maybe not. Who knows? The psyche is a weird and delicate thing, but this would need to be discussed with women and, well, men too, who were victims of sexual harassment, to decide whether it makes any sense to try to assign a taxonomy to this. I won't do it, but there are some very strange stories floating around out there, and I guess it would make a difference to me as a layperson, and that's part of the problem. That means I'd be on a jury about this. I'm not an expert witness. I'd be a jurist about it, and a juror about it, I guess, not a jurist. That would make me a judge. And but like, for instance, we're not talking about Mark Halperin doing the sorts of things, the blatant sorts of, pulling down your pants and exposing yourself kind of thing. I hope that we're talking about with Harvey Weinstein. I say I hope, not because I need to save Mark Halperin in my mind, but because I don't want to find out that women had to see Mark Halperin pull his pants down. There seems to be at least a qualitative difference of sorts. It doesn't excuse it or make it any less shocking to find out that it happened, because the ultimate outcome is usually the same. Women, talented women who could be making a huge name for themselves in journalism, might be running away from that profession or have had opportunities to excel closed off to them because they didn't respond to Halperin's harassment correctly in his mind. We know that happened with Harvey Weinstein. We don't know how much of it, I don't know, has happened with Mark Halperin, but so the effect of it seems to be the same, even if the horror value of the story turns out to be less. I don't know. Let's see. He puts it this way. He's already out there apologizing, sort of, I guess. I don't know. Let's read it and decide whether it's enough of an apology. During this period, when he was at ABC News and harassing people, I guess, I did pursue relationships with women, that could mean anything, that I worked with, including some junior to me. Halperin said in a statement to CNN Wednesday night, I now understand from these accounts that my behavior was inappropriate and caused others pain. For that, I am deeply sorry and I apologize. Under the circumstances, I'm going to take a step back from my day-to-day work while I properly deal with this situation. I don't really know what any of that means ultimately, but it's good sounding words. I doubt that it's satisfactory to any of his victims or to people who are better versed in the reality of sexual harassment than I am, but that's about the bare minimum you could ask for. Like at this point, if he was really serious about sorting the issues out, you could get away with that as a statement and saying, hey, I can't. This is a big and serious situation. Real things happened to real people, and people really got hurt, and I can't resolve it for you in a single statement to CNN. I need to step back and figure things out. Like a totally honest and forthright assessment of what you did and what it means and what you ought to do about it would probably begin that way, even though we would like to see him punch himself in the face and, fling himself from, let's say, the second story window so he injures an ankle or something on his way to rehabilitation. Anyway, it could mean anything. I don't know. I guess I'll acknowledge again that my layman's understanding of things in terms of the actions taken, I would assume that most people would probably see a difference in what Harvey Weinstein did versus if we're supposed to take away from this, well, I hit on women in the workplace, some of whom were junior to me, in the hopes that we would go out on dates and pursue an otherwise normal relationship, if that's possible, versus I want you to corner this young woman in my office and make sure she's alone and turn off the security cameras, and I'm going to expose myself to her. That would be worse in my view. In terms of the immediate impact on the person, certainly, and what they were doing and what they were allowing to go on at ABC News. It doesn't sound from this like there was the pervasive sexual harassment atmosphere at ABC News that I think I see at Fox News, for instance, because of the number of people who are accused. But I guess it could turn out by the end of the week that 15 people at ABC News did the same thing, especially since, just to really help encapsulate the problem and admit the difficulty in processing it that someone like me might have right at the outset. ABC News is probably full of people that could be easily dismissed as old-fashioned thinkers. Well, they were just, look, there was an attractive woman at work and they wanted to date her, and back in the day that wasn't against the rules, but he's not that old. That was probably always against the rules. But even so, there are still people who dismiss the whole thing and who say, he's just trying to get a date. And it's like, hey, he was, but that's inappropriate in the workplace, not because, well, it makes things awkward for that person or you or people who have to work with you, but because it introduces a dynamic that doesn't belong in a professional workplace where people are supposed to advance based on merit, not, oh, she's sleeping her way to the top, by the way, because that's the accusation that for years got made. Amazingly, the victims of these sexual harassment situations very often caught up in that with talk about blaming the victim. She's sleeping her way to the top. She had no choice in many cases. I'm sure somebody just outright set out at some point in history to say, I'm sleeping my way to the top and I don't care who knows it, or I don't care what they think about me. I'm going to get to the top and I'm going to crush everybody. But I would assume that those people are few and far between. It seems to me that just the whole thing, the things we read yesterday, the tweet storms at the end that I recommended to, some of which I got through and some of which I didn't, the articles that they linked to, just it's an amazing problem. And it's so pervasive in our society that we have like romantic comedy movies about this whole thing. We saw the other day, I don't know, in the middle of the Weinstein story, I guess it was Atrios that tweeted something like, and this is true, and it's known. Atrios wasn't the first one, obviously, to make this observation or anything, but he did, and I'm glad he made it again so that we could point it out. Hollywood and Hollywood culture, the I hesitate to call it a classic film because it's not really, but I guess cult classic film, 80s cult classic film, Revenge of the Nerds. He was tweeting about Revenge of the Nerds, which most of you have probably seen. My audience skews a little older, like me. Those of you who are younger probably think, oh, I don't watch old movies, which is kind of heartbreaking for all of us. But those who remember the movie know that one of the, I'm going to say climactic scenes and then say, that's probably not the word for it. But anyway, the hero, the supposed hero, commits an on-screen rape in that movie. And that's supposed to be the hilarious conclusion of it all. Those of you who are not familiar with the movie, or those of you who are familiar with the movie and saying, wait a minute, what on-screen rape are you talking about? If we have people like that in our audience, welcome to the 2010s here. That scene where... I don't even remember the name of the characters anymore. One of our top nerds in the Revenge of the Nerds ends up having sex with, raping, as I said, one of the attractive women from the sorority that dates the jocks. He tricks her into thinking that he's her boyfriend. He's in a Halloween mask, a Darth Vader mask, I think, and even framing it as, well, he has sex with her with that mask on. That's the wrong framing. He fools her. That's rape. But it's a big romantic awakening for her. Are all nerds as good as you? And then that's terrific. I'm so glad you raped me that way. The sexual experience was wonderful, and so therefore I'm switching my allegiances. Are all nerds as good as you? That's a horrific thing to do to somebody. And I guess we were all at the time like, well, it's okay because now she loves him and that's good. And those nerds, they just need a little break to get the girls to like them. Or thinking back on, there's a lot of movies, like a lot of songs like that. Every year Christmas time rolls around. I guess that's coming. The stores think it's next week, but every time Christmas time rolls around and we hear the older versions, there's remakes out there now of Baby It's Cold Outside. Like, you need to let her go home, man. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this song has gone on for too long. And then she gets worried about what did you put in her drink. There's some serious issues floating around out there. We think that stuff is cute. I didn't even get to the rest of this story about Mark Halperin. But just by way of illustrating another sort of, well, isn't that something? Isn't that special? Isn't that cute or funny? The story I read to you yesterday about George H.W. Bush being involved in sexual harassment. I actually have some more information on that and another article on that. And we read the story yesterday. It was kind of puzzling and weird and then it was disturbing because we read about the security guard who said, well, if you didn't want to get groped, you shouldn't have stood next to him for the picture. Like, you can't actually tell people that they can't stand next to former presidents of the United States or else they'll get groped. That's a problem. Part of our systemic problem. But there's more. Beginning with the fact that there's now a second woman, and a second actress at that, he likes actresses, who says, George H.W. Bush groped me, again, in his wheelchair. Now, this is what becomes interesting. They attempt to try to justify this, I guess, at some point. His people, Bush's people, are trying to make out like, it's not what you think. But it is. Second woman, George H.W. Bush groped me. This reported by, I have Deadspin open here. Dave McKenna's story that reads, earlier this week, actress Heather Lind said in a now deleted Instagram post, and I'm sure there are guys out there saying, well she deleted it because she knew it wasn't true. So there's that problem. But anyway, Heather Lind says that former President George H.W. Bush had sexually assaulted her. He touched me from behind from his wheelchair, you remember the story, with his wife Barbara Bush by his side. He told me a dirty joke, and then, all the while being photographed, touched me again. And that's about the most sterile description that I've heard made of it, and it made it difficult to understand exactly what was going on, but it certainly gave the impression that, okay, This was regarded as sexual harassment by Heather Lind, and that's the important thing right now. But the article goes on to say that is not the end of things. Jordana Grolnick, a New York actress, has a story to tell that doesn't sound very different at all. I got sent the Heather Lind story by many people this morning, Grolnick says, and I'm afraid that mine is entirely similar. So it seems like sort of a pattern. Rumors about Bush groping actresses in this manner have been circulating for a while. Once again, he just sort of floats along like, you can't say that sort of thing about a former president, especially one that's now debilitated and in a wheelchair. And we're supposed to feel like, either sorry for him or venerate him because he's a former president, a war hero kind of thing. Look, I guess war heroes grope people too, and you got to take the good with the bad. It's a shame to have to do this all the time, but then of course it's a shame that this happens all the time, and we have to take note of it in people that we would otherwise. I don't admire George H.W. Bush, but other people do, and it's going to be hard for them, and they're going to be defensive about it. Anyway, I should get on with the story, and I get too sidetracked, even though this story is a sidetrack. What a morning. Rumors about Bush groping actresses in this manner have been circulating for a while. More than a year ago, a tipster passed word about the Heather Lind incident to Deadspin. We were told that Bush had, during a photo op, groped her and told her this. Okay, I got to pause here because this is part of the story. Plus I have to stop and say, all right, last year, a year ago? Deadspin. I don't, depend on Deadspin for breaking the important news all the time. But the point is that this is illustrative of a lot of things that's going on. I'm sure that more than Deadspin got this note. So for more than a year, we've known that George H.W. Bush is habitually sexually harassing actresses in photos in public places. But everybody says, well, you can't print that. And I guess the real fear is, that we'll be sued. We'll be sued for libel. And right now, we don't have enough notes to be able to find witnesses in our defense at this point. I mean, I guess that's what it comes down to, legally speaking. But I don't know. It's disappointing. Now, I'm going to skip the end of that paragraph, because there's some descriptive language in there. Not that it's too dirty to read on the air or anything, even for you guys up in Rochester. And I don't think it's not like you Rochester people are snowflakes. It's just that you could be listening on WRFZ, and I don't want to cost them their license. We'll get back to that part a little bit later. We'll skip forward here. Reached for comment, Bush spokesperson Jim McGrath provided the following statement. Okay. Let me hear what you have to say, your side of the story. I'll allow it. Go ahead. At age 93, oh boy, President Bush has been confined to a wheelchair for roughly 5 years. So his arm falls on the lower waist of people with whom he takes pictures. You could, of course, leave your hands on your lap, or you could give the big thumbs up or wave, or just rest your arms in your wheelchair, or hold the hand, really, even, of the person next to you, although that could be considered inappropriate too. I don't know that you have to have their arm around their back or their waist. And, of course, the lower waist. That's not my lower waist. But okay. It's an attempt at an explanation. And I'll entertain the possibility that, okay, he's in a wheelchair. He's lower than other people. He's 93. He can't keep his arms up, etc. But like Greg told us yesterday, there's plenty of people in nursing homes, and the nurses will tell you he was like that when he could walk. Maybe true. I mean, there were rumors about Bush. There's rumors about every person, every powerful person anyway. Okay, so his arm falls on the lower waist of people with whom he takes pictures. To try to put people at ease, the president routinely tells the same joke, and on occasion, he has patted women's rears. On occasion, he's patted women's rears in what he intended to be a good-natured manner. He thought, if, for instance, we would make a great baseball team, and I just imagined you hit a stand-up triple. Good one. Whack. Right on the, well done, right? But I don't play baseball. Well, but you could. I've seen a league of their own. I'm into equality. But I didn't. Okay. All right, so on occasion he's patted women's rears in what he intended to be a good-natured manner. Some have seen it as innocent. Others clearly view it as inappropriate. people with asses, for instance, will view that as inappropriate. Others with no nerve endings in their lower waist probably think it's innocent. I don't know anyone like that, but to anyone he has offended, President Bush apologizes most sincerely. I can tell how sincere it is by the fact that Jim McGrath said it, and blanket apology. Anyone with nerve endings in their lower waist that was offended because of their stupid nerves, fine. President Bush apologizes, okay? Kiss my ass. Okay, in reporting out the tip, I found two actresses. This is our writer, Dave McKenna, here. In reporting out the tip, I found two actresses, Lind and Grolnick, who had accused Bush of groping, and also two Twitter users who, on April 4th, 2014, by way of claiming this as a receipt, right, made reference to this joke that he talked. Now, this is where I guess I'll tell you, I'll skip down to Grolnick's story where you'll get the gist of what happened here. In August 2016, Grolnick was working at a Maine production. Bill, did you see this? Of Hunchback of Notre Dame. And he was, see, the thing is, Bush was looking for the Hunchback and couldn't find it. The former president, who summers in nearby Kennebunkport and frequents this theater, caught a performance. He came backstage during an intermission, he says, and she and the rest of the cast gathered for a photo with him. Why not? You're being visited by a former president. How nice. Grolnick now says that other actors told her before the photo that Bush had a reputation for fondling during photo ops. Wow, that is some kind of reputation. Now, this is where it gets weird. I mean, it was weird already. She says, I guess I was thinking, he's in a wheelchair. What harm could he do? She doesn't take it seriously. And then her question got answered. We all circled around him and Barbara for a photo. You know what? That music tells me that I'm going to run into trouble. I mean, not just because I'm reading you about what George Bush does, but I'll tease you this way and say, why don't you wait 2 minutes for the exciting conclusion of Bush gropes the actress backstage in Maine. We'll be back after this. We are back with the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and if you waited on the edge of your seat for the exciting conclusion of George W. Bush gropes an actress during a Maine production of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, you were waiting for, okay, what is this dirty joke that Bush tells? It's here, and it's not the aristocrats. He's not hanging around for that long. And, you know, you get to be 94 years of age. You don't want to invest that much time in setting up such a punchline. But I was curious myself. What is this joke? And what did Lind mean? He told me a dirty joke. He touched me from behind and he told me a dirty joke and he did it again. The doing it again sort of thing makes me, that's what makes it. That's what makes it definitely harassment. Doing it the first time is harassment. Doing it the second time is what gets you convicted of harassment, even though you say it was an accident, because doing it a second time proves that it wasn't. So here's the deal. His people are saying, he's in a wheelchair. He starts out lower than you. And I guess, they don't come out and say he's a weak old man and can't keep his arms up. But I guess you could go that route. And if the touching was inadvertent and then he told this joke by way of excusing the easy to interpret as inappropriate touching, I could maybe say, all right, I buy the story of it's not necessarily intentional. But the rest of Grolnick's story makes it clear that it is intentional. On the other hand, here's my problem. Here's my fault, I guess I should say. My problem, not my problem with the story, but my problem with myself and the society we live in is so I read the joke and I laughed and I said, it's, that I thought it was like funny and I guess clever, and it's not super clever. It's supposed to disarm you and allow you to get away with this thing. But then the second grope makes it clear that this was not just excuse me sort of situation, but also the fact that I laughed and said, and even for a moment considered dismissing it. So he's just one of those dirty old men. He's not really going to stand up out of his wheelchair and rape you. Well, of course not. But that's not the issue either. The assault just happened, chair or no chair. and we're supposed to just go, oh, well, harmless old man kind of thing. And, but okay, this one's a harmless old man. This one's a harmless 60-year-old man. That one's a harmless 40-year-old man. Here's a harmless 20-year-old guy. Just, okay, when do we say something about this? Okay, so here's the deal. So she's in this main production of The Hunchback. He comes backstage during the intermission and gathers for a photo, which really you should be leaving the cast alone during intermission. Wait until after the show. Anyway, Grolnick says other actors told her before the photo that Bush had this reputation for fondling during photo ops, but she didn't take it seriously. She's thinking he's in a wheelchair. What harm could he do? That's part of the problem too. Women think it too, right? It's a mistake, but they do think it. And, now hopefully people won't. Then she gets her question answered. We all circled around him and Barbara for the photo, and I was right next to him. He reached his right hand around to my behind as we smiled for the photo. So this is where you might say, oh, it's inadvertent. And here's where you might tell this joke to lighten the mood and say, I realize that my hand is actually not on your lower waist, but on your butt. And I'm weak and I can't keep my arm up. And here's how I want you to excuse me. Then, of course, he blows it all up by doing the following. So he tells his dirty joke. Here's the dirty joke. It's a one-liner. He says to the group as he's got his hands on their butts, do you want to know who my favorite magician is? No. But what do you say to the former vice president? Besides, it's only intermission. We got to get back. There are costume changes to do here. Hurry up, old man. Who's your favorite magician? As I felt his hand dig into my flesh, he said, I'm laughing right now. It's so stupid. David Copperfield. I think I'm laughing because George H.W. Bush knows the term Copperfield. But, okay, it's dopey. Right? And I'm laughing. And for a second, I'm like, I almost want to say, hey, George W. Bush, H.W. Bush, has a sense of humor. Of course, all it is cover for his sexually assaulting people, and now it's not funny anymore. Grolnick says others in the room laughed politely and out of discomfort. Former First Lady Barbara Bush was among those nearby. She said something along the lines of, he's going to get himself put into jail, to which we laughed harder, Grolnick says, and then he goes and that's the line he gives, and then he squeezes their butts again. And it's really something that, and I guess people walk away saying dirty old man. And, she's got, at the moment, she's like, well, I've been sexually assaulted, but that doesn't feel like the words I would use about, old retired president man in his wheelchair. It feels like, I'm at a loss for words. It feels like that if she went away from that and said, like immediately, George H.W. Bush just sexually assaulted me, all the other people in the picture would say, what are you talking about? We were just standing with him. We didn't see any of that happen. Well, why do you think he said the David Copperfield thing? He was squeezing my butt. Oh, but people would probably say, he's just a dirty old man making a stupid dirty old man joke. But, and the actress would probably then think, yeah, I don't know. I guess well, people who told me that he has a reputation for doing that, I will share the story with them and say, I couldn't believe it. I didn't believe you when you said it. And then it happened to me, and everybody laughs about the shared experience they have because it wasn't a rape. People think they can kind of laugh it off and, I'll take a shower and I'll be done with it. But you'll have that memory lingering. Now, and it's also different that George H.W. Bush doesn't then roll over to the director and say, I want that one out of the show because, whatever. She smacked my hand or she didn't laugh hard enough at my joke. He doesn't operate with that kind of control. He's in a position of power, certainly. And I guess the power dynamic there is, I'm George H.W. Bush. No one is going to report me for sexual harassment. And that's how he continues to get away with it. It's not exactly the same as leveraging the hiring and firing power over people, but he knows pretty well that nobody is going to say that. And that people like me will say, I don't believe it. When they see the story, when I saw it yesterday, I can't believe it. George H.W. Bush. Well, I guess everybody's involved in it. What is this, back in the day when he was ambassador to China or CIA director? No, wheelchair last year. Wow, I can't hardly believe it. Yeah, well, he knows that you can't hardly believe it. That's why he continues to do it, and he knows he'll get away with it, and he'll die before anybody, puts him on trial for it, I guess. Anyway, it was weird, and there was a lot of layers to it, so I thought it was a good distraction story. There's a little bit more to the reporting on this, and I guess by way of following up on these thoughts, I'll read the rest of it because Grolnick has some thoughts to express. She consented to have her name used in this post, but requested we not include the name of the theater where the incident occurred. That's interesting. She says she did more than put out word of the incident on Instagram. However, she told friends and family, too. And she was heartened that despite the power differential between the accuser and the accused, there were no hints that she was making anything up. Nobody didn't believe me. Yeah, because that's actually, it's funny. We don't have problems believing that because of the enduring myth of the dirty old man in our society. Like, of course he did that. Why aren't we cleaning this crap up? Those around her, though, had varied reactions to the news that she'd been groped, and there's an asterisk on groped. Is that explained at the bottom, or is it explained? There's a little link here. Now I'm curious. Why would you asterisk groped? She was groped right on the asterisk, I guess. There we are. The word groped was substituted for assaulted after initial publication here. That is interesting all by itself. I guess that's what I'm talking about. Right? What I was saying before, if you walk away and say, I just got sexually assaulted, everybody will say, what are you talking about? Well, I got groped. Oh, groped. Oh, that's different. Either when you said sexual assault, I thought rape or, indecent exposure from the guy or something or whatever. But groped, that's okay. Groped. Everybody gets groped, and everybody does get groped. That happens all the time. And it's wrong, and it's part of our continuing problem here that people expect that there'll be groping going on, or that we try to differentiate between groping and other things. I don't know. But that's an interesting point all by itself. Those around her had varied reactions to the news she'd been groped, asterisk. Wow. I told my grandmother first because she was with me right after it happened, Grolnick said. She just said, oh, he's just sick. He hasn't been well for years. She was just laughing it off. She'd been taught to laugh it off because whatever. She's had longer exposure to our strange society than the rest of us have. So she's, and, when people say it's a generational thing, that's a generational thing for the victims, too. Grolnick says, however, that her father got angry. Again, good, but then also, again, one of those other, part of the reaction to the reactions of last week was, men realize this problem when it either happens to their daughter or when they say, what's the famous line, the famous throwaway, oh my God line, or people say, as the father of daughters, I am particularly offended by this. And that, of course, only makes things worse. Like, in other words, it happened. Your honor is offended because you're the father of daughters. I mean, obviously, the correct statement here is, as the father of no one in particular, not even a father, as a person, I'm offended because a person's, dignity has been violated here. To a greater or lesser extent, they may have been intimidated in their job performance or just in their life. That's the problem here. As the father of daughters, you have to have a daughter to understand that that's not right, or you're only interested in it happening to daughters. As the father of a son, if George H.W. Bush pinches either of my son's butts, I'll be offended about that too. I can promise you that. If George H.W. Bush pinches somebody else's butt, I'll be offended on your behalf. That's fine, even if you're not my son or daughter. I'll give you that. How about that? That's my pledge to you. Anyway, there's an awful lot packed into this. Grolnick says her father got angry, but she now says she never seriously considered pushing the matter with the theater or legal authorities and almost laughed it off. I just thought, whatever, he's a dirty old man. There it is. Why is that a phrase? How do we come to accept that as a phrase? Oh, he's just a dirty old man. Why are old men dirty? Well, because all men are dirty, I guess. Not all men. Yes, what can I tell you? Everybody is at some level. The point is, some men keep their hands off you, some men don't. And those are the ones you got to look out for. But by the way, every time you see a male coming, there's a pretty good chance that, one, he's got hands. And unfortunately, two, there's a chance that you might have to look out for that guy's hands being on you. Dirty old man. It's amazing that that's such a... It was a meme before there were memes. And that's a problem. Recent trends, it says, in truth-telling in entertainment and media and empathy for Lind changed Grolnick's mind about the propriety of letting the matter die. I don't want to belittle Heather Lind for feeling violated, she says. Now that the Me Too movement, the hashtag Me Too movement, has brought this all to light, I think I should have been a little more alarmed to be touched so inappropriately by a man who was once the leader of the free world. He knows the power he has and the reverence he deserves, and it's true because he did some other things besides grope actresses, some of which were good, some of which were horrible. He deserves some reverence, say, for the World War II service. That sounds pretty good, right? Someone could tell me something crappy about that, and I'd have to believe it at this point. Even while sitting, perhaps somewhat senile, in a wheelchair. There we are. What I've come to realize is that if we tolerate these small comments and grazes, now it's a graze, from men on the street or former presidents, they might assume that it's okay with us, and they may take it as permission to do who knows what else. It's true. I realized that making light of the situation was the wrong move. It wasn't okay for him to do that to me. He wasn't able to give me a job or a movie deal. So I didn't feel compromised or pressured to do anything more, but the comments and assumptions about our bodies must stop at all levels. Yeah. So I'm glad I got to the end because I never really got to that part. I alluded to it, but, like I said, you really have to yield the stage at this point to the people to whom this has happened and let them express their views of it. And that's probably the best way of getting that story told properly instead of my trying to parse it. But then again, I'm here and she's not. So we're going to have to make do now that it's showtime. So yes, Mark Halperin, that guy. Also, apparently, Michael Musson tells me that the accusation with regard to Halperin is one of groping as well. So, I guess we have to take that into account now, and I'll read on with the story. Let's see. Where are we here? There's more here. Okay. Karen has sent me, I suppose you saw this, guessing George H.W. Bush isn't going to grope a famous reporter. Okay, yeah. What do I do? Halperin or this? We're still on Bush, so I'll go over to this one. I don't know if I saw this one. This is from Andrea Mitchell. Mrs. Bush was at his side. I guess she's talking about one of these. Which of these stories is this? Is this the Deadspin one that she's talking about? I guess so. Well, at least it's the statement from the spokesperson that ended up in the Deadspin story. At age 93, President Bush has been confined to a wheelchair for roughly 5 years, so his arm falls lower on the waist. And let's see. First, Jonathan Swan from Axios has got this thing, and he tweeted it. And then Andrea Mitchell retweets his tweet with this comment. Mrs. Bush was at his side. He is in a wheelchair with Parkinson's syndrome. Really? Someone should be ashamed, and it isn't 41. Oh, wow. I guess I'm stunned is the word for this, and it's very unusual that I don't know what to say, but this is like mixing the awful statement offered by the spokesperson with the awful statement offered about John Kelly by Sarah Huckabee Sanders that it's inappropriate to question a general. Like this, he's in a wheelchair with Parkinson's and he's president, and so you should be ashamed for. I don't understand. I don't know. Unless I misunderstand it, is Andrea Mitchell possibly saying that the spokesperson is the one who should be ashamed? Mrs. Bush was at his side. Like, that's a bad thing. He's in a wheelchair with Parkinson's syndrome. Really? Someone should be ashamed and it isn't 41, but why would you say that? So that can't be the interpretation either. Although I guess I would say the spokesperson should be ashamed at having offered the excuse that he's in a wheelchair with Parkinson's as an excuse for telling the David Copperfield joke and then squeezing her butt the second time. I guess it doesn't surprise me. Andrea Mitchell sometimes says monumentally stupid things in defense of people that have done things that are indefensible. But this is just one of those things that I think blinders that are on people who hold presidents and former presidents in awe because they've professionally been trained to do that, which is probably a problem for people who are journalists. Like, you shouldn't put them on a pedestal. You should be scrutinizing their lives, but they're trained supposedly to scrutinize their political lives and to separate out any ideas they have about their personal lives, although that becomes an issue now too. And I don't know. I don't even want to. I hadn't seen it, Karen. Thank you for showing it to me. I'm disheartened, But I guess this also goes to show that, like, women in general, it would be stupid to make a blanket statement like, well, women know what's going on with. I mean, some women do know what's going on, and some women do not know what's going on. But some women understand what's happening. Some women are taught, conditioned, whatever, to ignore what's happening for various reasons. And I guess it's probably correlates somewhat with age, just like dirty old man stuff does. And generationally, I don't know. I'm not even certain what to take away from it, except to make these comments and say, wow, it gives me a headache to think about how effed up our society can sometimes be. Let's see. Bill, who's, as you know, in Portland, Maine. And so really, basically, for Bill now to talk about this situation, given that it happened in a theater in Maine, according to Fox News, this is collusion, Bill, and you're guilty. But we'll read this anyway. When Benny Hill, he writes, tried to grope women, the whole village chased him around really fast while angrily wielding canes and sticks. That's true, even in the Benny Hill days, when the whole show was about basically setting up Benny Hill for an opportunity to grope women, really, if you think about it, which fits entirely our pattern that we discussed in previous weeks with Fox News and Trump Organization and everything else. But even then, part of the joke, part of the understanding of the cultural phenomenon was that this thing that the old men were doing was worthy of a beating by the townsfolk. I mean, that's part of the understanding there too. Why do we ignore that part? Ha ha! They viciously beat this man. But of course, we're supposed to be against that too. Yes, you're right. First of all, the gentleman is entitled to a defense, and he's innocent until proven guilty. Although that didn't happen. Presumably, those scenes are staged in the United Kingdom, where it is true that you're still largely innocent until proven guilty. But constitutional procedure doesn't apply there. That's true. I'm not a British constitutional lawyer. Those of you who are, you're welcome as guests. Record a segment for the Kagro in the Morning Show and send it in. Tell us how British justice would deal with the dirty old man situation. I don't know. Let's see. Should we care if people are offended? Asks Warlock. I'm not certain how to take that. Yes? Am I done? Have I answered the question properly? I don't know. Or should we care if people are offended, meaning like it's bad even if people aren't offended? Like, for instance, Andrea Mitchell isn't offended. Does that mean that this actress is wrong? Or that I'm wrong for paying attention to it? I'm not certain how to take. We're trying to be nuanced here. We're not closing off any avenues of discussion here. But okay, we should get back to what's his name? What is his name? Mark Halperin. Although before I even jump back to that, I see Ezra Klein now tweeting. Vox is going to explain sexual harassment to us all. Thank you. The evidence that Donald Trump sexually assaulted a slew of women, we know, is similar both in kind and quality to the evidence that Weinstein did. So why are the outcomes so different? Everyone's asking that question. I thought it was important to let you know that Ezra Klein is tweeting about it and that Vox will be explaining it to us later. But also, yes, it's interesting that, again, the kind and quality of the evidence and the incidents themselves comes up again, and reminds me that I guess there certainly is room for comparing the evidence and the qualitative evidence, the qualitative value of the evidence, the sorts of things that make people change their reporting from assaulted me to groped me. It feels like it's not quite fair to put them in the same category, but there is. Are we talking about category errors again here? By the way, Bruce sent me. McFallon sent me something a couple of days after our discussion about category errors that convinced me that I had made a category error about my thinking about category errors. But are we making a category error here too, or are there just two different levels or three or multiple levels on which we could be analyzing this question? I offer the thinking of Vox and Ezra Klein as evidence that there's a lot of people that consider that there might be room for these things. Okay, Mark Halperin. I guess we'll find out what he did finally at last. You've probably read the article already in the time it took me to get around to it. He's taking a step back from his day-to-day work while he properly deals with the situation, or as Justice put it, he's taking time off to spend more time with other people's families. Yikes. MSNBC, where Halperin makes frequent appearances on Morning Joe, said early Thursday that Halperin would leave his roles at that network and as an analyst at NBC News. We find the story and the allegations very troubling, MSNBC said in a statement. Mark Halperin is leaving his role as a contributor until the questions around his past conduct are fully understood. By way of another diversion here, I'll just make the point that Halperin is a frequent guest on Morning Joe, where the hosts are married. And that's an interesting situation too. Like now we say, oh, the hosts are married, so all the things that happened are now magically legitimized by their having said magic words in a church somewhere or with an official celebrant or perhaps City Hall. I don't know. But and as far as I know, no allegations that Joe Scarborough inappropriately pressured Mika Brzezinski into a relationship and then married her. And I guess we're supposed to think, well, they're married, so she couldn't have thought too badly of it. Although, I mean, is this like the romantic comedy outcome where as long as they end up happy and dating and or married in the end, none of the pressure is a bad situation? I'm not saying that Joe did anything, although, I don't know, maybe he did, for all I know. But this is the reason why, I mean, this is legitimate, by the way, to bring this up, in case anybody wants to object to this. Go ahead. We'll have a lengthy discussion about that after the next break. But what I mean is, this is why there are usually rules in workplaces about dating coworkers. And I'm sure there was perhaps such a rule, certainly at MSNBC at large. It was probably, I guess, frowned upon by the Human Resources Department. In other words, by the way, if you're not the highly paid multi-million-dollar talent on air and you tried to date somebody at the workplace and they weren't receptive to it, and then you stopped because you said, well, I asked her out and she said no, but it got reported to HR, not necessarily as harassment, but as, I saw this happen and this is against the rules. You could get fired, and you would get fired if you're just some person behind the scenes. But if you're the multi-million-dollar host, well, we'll maybe have a chat with them about entering a danger zone, but we're certainly not going to fire the guy. It costs too much money to replace him, and who knows what else. But that's why there are rules against, dating at work, generally speaking. We just want to do everything we can to avoid this problem from developing. But what does that have to do with anything? Why did Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski hide the fact of their relationship for so long? And I mean, Donald Trump found out about it too, and he teased them about it. And teased them about it. He was also brutal to them. When he was angry at them, he yelled about them. Crazy Mika and Joe, and I'll tell you the real story about them. They're trying to hide it. You remember that they tried to hide it. And they tried to hide it because we've all come to understand that those kind of relationships at work are improper and problematic, and so therefore we tried to ban them entirely, even if they are in fact entirely consensual in nature, if that can even happen. I mean, Mika's a pretty high-powered individual at MSNBC, but not by comparison. So the one person who has leverage over her is the chief host of the show, Scarborough. It's Morning Joe, not Morning Mika. But I don't know, so they worked it out, and they sanctified the whole thing with marriage. The sanctity of marriage, ladies and gentlemen, I guess another good reason why marriage equality is an absolute must. Yes, because otherwise oriented individuals, and we'll use all the correct letters here, LGBTQ, can you get fired precisely because of your sexual orientation, because there's no way for you to sanctify your improper relationship in the end unless you have access to actual full marriage equality? What a weird way of getting around to that issue. That feels improper all on its own. And anyway, it's time for us to get ready for our shorter 1 minute top of the hour break. I don't think we're going to get off the sexual harassment topic at all today, and maybe that's entirely appropriate. A day and a half, because you could spend all week on it. God knows there are bosses around America that are spending months and months and months and years on top of years on the same subject. We'll be back after this break. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show. As we wind our music down, I got to make a 1 minute plus 10 seconds version of that bit of music so that I can play it and not have to wind down the music the same way I let it just play out for the 2 minute thing. I'm going to talk to myself as the producer here for just a moment. I hope you'll all bear with me. Some other interesting observations that have been made here, and I still haven't read the entirety of the Halpern story, and I may never get there. But your observations, as usual, are very good ones. First of all, let's see, in terms of chronology. The Warlock comes back and says, if Jeb Bush is offended, it does not help. I am likewise baffled by that one. You have 140 characters coming to you, Warlock. We'll see if we can unravel this one. I'm not certain what I'm even responding to there. Let's see. Karen has a second bit here about Halpern, and Halpern did more than grope, according to accusers. So we've got more. I'll get to, is this the same article? The CNN Money one? Yeah, 5 women. Okay, so I guess I'll eventually get to it, but she's clipped a bit here and underlined it, certain parts here, so we'll get. I guess if I don't get to, because there's a distinct possibility I never make it to the bottom of this article, I'll come back and read what Karen has highlighted for us, because that's clearly the most important part. She's doing the job of the producer today too. This is what I really need. A producer would give me excerpts of articles, although I don't know. Somehow I think that parsing the hell out of things is somehow more, certainly more entertaining to me than having the news read to me, somebody else's decisions about what's the important part. Of course, that's what's happening to you right now. But okay, the point is, this is therapy for me. Thank you. Monica has this to add. Mommy CA20, our good friend Monica, listens to the show and contributes quite often via Twitter. By the way, you can do the same if you're on Twitter. If you're not, go get it. I guess I should get a piece of the action from Twitter, but I don't think they're making any money yet. Go ahead and use the KITM hashtag, Kagro in the morning, KITM. Send your notes to me, and they will linger on my screen a little bit longer, and I can get to them. Joe and Mika, she says, are not married yet. Oh, my God. So it's not even sanctified. I should have thought of that, because I thought some of the big story was that Trump himself was offering to marry them, although so was Jared Kushner. And remember, according to the reports, we read them on the air, so like a year ago, that Jared Kushner offered to perform the wedding, and Trump said, screw you, chump, I'll do it, basically, is what he was saying. You're not important, I am. Anyway, they're not married yet. So it's all a sin all over again, I guess. And he's just sexually harassing her, but she's into it. So I guess, I don't know. What does this mean? This is also, here's another fantastic observation about the societal weirdness of it all. Another companion story to the Revenge of the Nerd story. Rebecca Romans reminds us, I didn't watch it, General Hospital, enormously popular soap opera with the teen girls when I was a teen. And they all watched it. And they all talked about it. And everyone remembers, if you're old enough, the Luke and Laura romance. And I don't know. General Hospital still in the air? They still, every once in a while I see a tabloid online at the supermarket that I guess they brought that whole storyline back or whatever, and it's still in the air. So I don't monitor the soap operas, but she's right. Some people may remember General Hospital's famous Luke and Laura romance. This I did not know, which began with Luke raping Laura at a nightclub. Wow, I did not know that, or if I did, I forgot it. I didn't follow the thing, but that seems like an important detail. I mean, the teenage girls, when I was a teenager, were raised with this as an ideal. Everyone was talking about the Luke and Laura romance and how wonderful it is. And I mean, I could see how that could happen. I mean, I could see how it would happen among teenage girls that maybe don't even understand what happened, or maybe they didn't see that episode. I don't know. Maybe they joined the story and they were just romantically involved, and they didn't see. But I mean, that's pretty amazing. Began with Luke raping Laura at a nightclub, but love soon blossomed, so all is forgiven, I guess. Oh my God, my society, what are you doing to me? I wish for the good old days, like Donald Trump. I'm going to make America great again, when it was lovely and romantic to rape people in nightclubs. Maybe she'll like it. She might marry me. Who knows? Worst that could come out of it is I get accused of rape. Which at the time, by the way, was like, maybe I can. And I say at the time, what am I thinking? Just this morning, I was watching somebody tweet on a totally different topic, white privilege, which I guess is all wrapped up in this too. But pointing out that, what was it? The name of the college athlete, the swimmer. All I remember is that I think his name was something ridiculous like Brock. You know what I'm talking about? The college swimmer was at Stanford who raped a woman on campus and got, like 3 months in jail, or maybe like a probation and mostly suspended. We don't want to ruin his life. You remember the story. There are lots like it. That's where we come to the rape culture on campus situation, which Republicans dismiss as complete bunk. And our current Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, is in the middle of trying to dismantle all of what little progress there's been on dismantling rape culture on campus. Man, this is a bigger story than I realized when I got into this. But that's why I love this show. I love the show because it's my show. But maybe it's why you love the show. This is why. Brock Turner. Thank you, Brett Arna. We have a big audience today. By the way, we did not exactly record setting, but a very, very big audience. We tripled our current usual download numbers. Were people talking about this show and spreading the word of it? Because lots of people listening and reacting this morning. Brock Turner, yes, thank you. Brett Arano, who tweets as Victory Trauma, by the way, in case you'd like to follow along, says Brock Turner is the name of the kid I'm thinking of. The kid. Again, the fully grown adult who belongs in prison, who I'm thinking of. And yeah, it was being made as a white privilege observation alongside the story of a black woman who was in jail for 21 years for a nonviolent drug offense. P.S. If you're a white athlete, you get 3 months, right? This whole thing. But I guess that's all tied up in that. And now I forgot where we were going. This is the problem of going down all these different avenues here. But yeah, I guess I was just thinking of, where were we? Luke and Laura, and then things blossoming into romance. I'm lost. Well, during the next break, someone can try and remind me. Use the hashtag. Where was I going with this? Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm certain it was a terrific point, but boy, now I'm so turned inside out about this whole situation. I guess we could go back to, I'll see if I can remember what I was going to say, because it seemed like a great idea at the time. But we'll go back to the Halpern story and see if we can't get to the part that Karen thought was important. As a matter of fact, maybe I'll open up that tweet so I can see the picture of what she underlined. And okay, that would probably raise my eyebrows when I get down to that point. And it's coming up. So here's Halpern's comment about it, right? Oh, I'm sorry. We were on the Morning Joe thing. Was that what we were doing? Was that what we were talking about? No, I don't think so. Ugh. This is very troubling that I can't think of what I was going to say. Okay. So where were we? We were, MSNBC was upset. They're putting Mark Halpern on leave. Widely considered to be one of the preeminent political journalists, Halpern, 52, has, among other career highlights, been political director at ABC News, co-authored the best-selling book Game Change, which was made into an HBO movie starring Julianne Moore as Sarah Palin, and anchored a television show on Bloomberg TV. He is featured in Showtime's The Circus, a show that chronicled the 2016 campaign cycle in the early days of the Trump presidency, and has a project in development with HBO, which, like CNN, is owned by Time Warner. Interesting, too. All right, here's where Karen began underlining, because something more serious than just, hey, want a date, happened. Women who spoke to CNN say he also has a dark side not made public until now. The stories of harassment shared with CNN range in nature from propositioning employees for sex. Hey, want to go on a date? No. Hey, want to have sex? That's different. To kissing and grabbing one's breasts against her will. So who thinks that's not this is something that gets done at work? Even if they, you know what? Even if there's already a relationship, what are you doing? You're at work. Just as did I observe this one on the air the other day? It was another story of cops raping a woman that they had in custody in New York. New York City Police Department, 2 detectives holding a suspect in custody, and they sexually assaulted her. They may have raped her, and their excuse was that it was consensual, which will, if true, will get you off the hook for a rape charge. But I mean, I thought that was an interesting observation for them to make. First of all, as if it was possible to consent in a situation where I'm holding you prisoner. Do you consent? I'm going to ruin your life and maybe put you in jail for the rest of your life. And who knows what, unless you have sex with me. Well, okay, then I consent. That's not consent. So there's no situation in which someone's prisoner can consent to sex. Thank you. Or slave, by the way. Might as well put that one out there, since this is a day of tying every storyline in the world together, because it is all connected, I guess. Anyway, no, you can't consent to sex with your jailer. And 2, even if there was some way for her to consent to this, aren't you working? What are you doing? Well, it's just consensual sex. I know, but you're on the clock. You're a detective. This is your prisoner. You can't. Suppose she says to you out of the blue, well, are you ready to confess? No, I'm not, but I am ready to have sex. Would you like that? The answer is I am working. And that's inappropriate even if I'm not. But the answer isn't, sure, that sounds like a terrific idea. Why don't I just punch out for a while? Hey, cover for me. Can you go catch some criminals? I'm going to be over here having some sex. Because it's consensual. You can't do that, gentlemen. So, all right, I grabbed her breasts against her will. A big deal. Don't do it anywhere. But if you can't value anything, and you can't control yourself, and you can't live as a upstanding member of society, do me this favor. This is my time. NFL players, you're fired if you kneel in protest before a game, because you're on my time. Mark Halpern, you want to grab somebody's breasts? Look, he's just a red-blooded American guy. Does what he does. Hey, she said no, so I left. What is this? Is work not sacrosanct now? It's the excuse we're using for violating someone's constitutional rights. We're going to fire you, And by the way, you would end up, I think, having a constitutional case in this one. Normally, we say, no, you people, you understand, you misunderstand the First Amendment. A private actor who says they disagree with you and takes either economic or other social action against you because they disagree with your viewpoint isn't a violation of your First Amendment rights. It is a violation of your First Amendment rights when the government is brought to bear against you. The full weight of the government comes down on you because of what you've said. It wouldn't be a thing necessarily if NFL owners were to pressure their coaches, for instance, to bench players. I mean, it would be a big annoyance and an outrage, and they'd hear from us about it. But when the President of the United States says, I want this to happen, this is what ought to happen, and begins to try to use his leverage to make that happen, now you might have a First Amendment case. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Mark Halperin again. 3 of the women who spoke to CNN described Halperin as, without consent, pressing an erection against their bodies, presumably his. I will say it would be an odd situation if it was someone else's, but it's an odd situation to begin with. Thank you. This is a very serious matter. It's a morning radio show, everybody. I'm trying. Pressing an erection against their bodies while he was clothed. Hallelujah for that one, I guess. Thank God. All right. Halperin denies grabbing a woman's breasts and pressing his genitals against the 3 women. Good to know. The women who worked with Halperin and who spoke with CNN did not report to Halperin. I guess that's good too, in a way. Some small blessing in this. However, Halperin made many decisions about political coverage at ABC News and had a voice in some critical personnel decisions. None of the women have said, though, that he ever promised anything in exchange for sex. He just wanted it. Or suggested that he would retaliate against anyone. And that's a key element if you want to convict him of something. But if you're just interested in saying, hey, this is improper, it should never go on, and it's intimidating, and it probably screwed a bunch of people up, but I can't prove it in a criminal court that you belong in jail about it. You deserve to be ashamed of it? Fine. But I can't prove it in a criminal court. Okay, fine. We can't do that, but still we need to talk about it, whether or not that's the case. Who knows what happened to these women and their careers? Maybe they could have been the ones making serious political coverage decisions at ABC News in his stead, but he scared the crap out of them and they never came back to work. I don't know what happened. It's all possible. And of course, lots of decisions made about political coverage at ABC News, and that would include these days reporting on sexual harassment charges being leveled against political figures or people who are ostensibly political figures anyway. And do we cover this or not? And if you are running around sexually harassing people, what are the odds that you end up like Andrea Mitchell saying, instead of, oh my God, how dare you grab the ass of actresses and get a reputation for doing so, while in a wheelchair, by the way, and trying to evoke our sympathy for that, instead you end up thinking things like, poor 41, and how dare anybody make this accusation against him? Because that's what political coverage looks like, and I'm a political reporter, and that's the culture I was raised in. We can blame the culture. We'll do Andrea Mitchell a favor. And she's not off the hook, but we can, for the moment, blame it on the culture and say, part of the culture is, look, I learned politics. She didn't learn politics from Mark Halperin, but I learned politics from men like Mark Halperin, for whom, look, hitting on women at work, it was a thing people did. I watched Mad Men. Everybody did it. Television's right about everything. I did not watch Mad Men. I watched everybody watch Mad Men. And so I know that this sort of thing happened. And but it was offered up as an ironic look back at how horrible things were. But, it reflects a real situation here. This is amazing. Okay, so what are we going to say here? He didn't suggest he was going to retaliate against anyone, so you don't convict him in criminal court of it. In the meantime, still, while they no longer work with him, Halperin continues to wield influence in politics and media. I guess maybe that's coming to an end. The women who spoke to CNN said it was for this reason that they shared their accounts on the condition of anonymity. Others said they still feel embarrassed about what happened to them and did not want to be publicly associated with it. Mark left ABC News over a decade ago, and no complaints were filed during his tenure, ABC News said in a statement provided to CNN after this article was published. What else are they going to say? The complaints weren't filed, they weren't filed. I mean, if they were filed and they were disappeared from the files, you got an issue. The fact that they weren't filed is a problem, yes, but it's not ABC's legal problem just yet. I got you. But all right. The first woman told CNN she was invited to visit his office in the early 2000s. Super exciting prospect, visiting Mark Halperin's office in the early 2000s, when he was political director at ABC News, to have a soda, because that's where sodas are. What? And said that while she was there with him, he forcibly kissed her and pressed his genitals against her body. That is lovely. What kind of soda was it? I went up to have a soda and talk, and he just kissed me and grabbed my boobs, the woman said. I just froze. I didn't know what to do. Same story we hear all over the place. Right up to the freezing. That's the most hurtful part. There are people who, probably everybody's obviously shocked and embarrassed and everything. But one of the most hurtful stories, I think, coming out of these things is women who were previously thought themselves confident women who were professionals and knew what they would do in a situation like that, and who come away with the self-doubt. I mean, after that, you doubt everything. I thought I knew what I would do in a situation like that. I've heard about this. People warned me about this, not about him specifically, but about this happening in the workplace and how it used to be accepted all the time. And that's BS, and I'm not going to stand for it if it happens to me. And then they freeze. And imagine the damage that does to you with everything else. Like, am I cut out for, maybe I'm not cut out for political work. Maybe I'm not cut out for entertainment work. Maybe I'm not cut out for news work. Maybe I'm not cut out for flipping burgers at this McDonald's. Whoever. Imagine not thinking you were worthy of promotion in that industry or any industry you chose from now on because I'm not the strong person I thought I was. All because this guy was like, if I promise her a soda, maybe I'll get somewhere. I don't know. And I said like, oh, we'll go up to my office, because that's where the soda is. It's not her, being dumb, obviously. A guy's going to have soda in his office. A high-powered executive political director, he has a refrigerator, he's going to have that stuff. But why? For convenience or for the... Harvey Weinstein always made sure there was a bottle of water there for you. I don't know. So you're invited under other pretenses. You imagine this is a famous person. They're not going to do something like that. They certainly would have been busted. They're too high profile for this to happen. And Mark Halperin, now he seems relatively harmless on the surface. Harvey Weinstein maybe was a leering wacko, and everybody sort of could tell right off the bat that he was like, Mark Halperin, you thought, no, probably not. And he invites you to his office for a soda. It's predatory in another weird way, right? Well, if I invite her up for a scotch, for a drink in the middle of the day, I'm going to look too Don Draper-ish, even before Don Draper was a character. That's going to tip people off. Come up to my place for an alcoholic drink in the middle of the day. That's going to be a big warning sign. Come up for a soda. I'm an innocent guy. I'm a Boy Scout. Come up for a soda. What harm could there be in a soda, right? And you go. When she did make her way out of his office, the woman told a friend at ABC News what had happened. That friend told CNN she remembered the woman telling her about the incident and seeing her visibly shaken. The second accuser, that is, another former ABC News employee, described a similar experience in his office during the 2004 campaign cycle. This woman said she was around 25 years old then and wanted to be a campaign off-air, ABC News' term for one of the reporters who travel embedded with the presidential campaigns. So she reached out to Halperin. She wanted this promotion, who was part of the decision-making process regarding those assignments at the time. So this is where the proof comes in for criminal conviction, I guess. Might not be enough to do it all by itself, but this is the kind of proof I was talking about. A quid pro quo being suggested here. The first meeting I ever had with him was in his office, and he just came up from behind. I was sitting in a chair across from his desk, and he came up behind me, and while he was clothed, he pressed his body on mine. Gotta say it, this happened. His penis on my shoulder. Which, like sodas go in an office, penises go on shoulders, I guess. This woman told CNN, I was obviously completely shocked. The obvious answer to all of this, by the way, is to ban food and drink inside the offices. It's hygienically a problem, and it's clearly leading to inappropriate situations. It's probably where we're going to get. We're going to ban sodas in offices in Congress before we ban bump stocks. I'm sure of it. I was obviously completely shocked. I can't even remember how I got out of there. Also a very common detail of the stories, by the way. People blank out about how they got the hell out of there, which is too bad because I'm hoping that means that somewhere there's video of Mark Halpern getting dick punched, but I guess not. But she says, I don't know how I got out of there, but I got out of there and I was freaked out by that whole experience. Given I was so young and new, I wasn't sure if that was the sort of thing that was expected of you if you wanted to something from a male figure in news. Turns out it was. We thought maybe it was just Roger Ailes, but then it was Roger Ailes and Bill O'Reilly and Eric Bolling and everybody else under the sun. And I guess Mark Halpern too. It's not Fox News is the sex cult. The whole world is a goddamn sex cult, but it is. So no news there. I'm retelling the story of the human condition at this point. The woman said Halpern continued to express his sexual desire for her in subsequent visits, despite being rebuffed. It was more like him coming up too close to me and sort of along the lines of hugging me, she explained. She also alleged that Halpern propositioned her for sex on the campaign trail. He would say, why don't you meet me upstairs? And I would say, because I think you're a filthy rapist. Or she said, that's not a good idea. That is true. And he would push the request further, the person said. Eventually, I would just ignore him and go about my business, which, of course, someone like Halpern says, She stopped saying no. That's not a no. And he probably really did think that. Not that he was talking himself into it unnecessarily. He probably just really did think it. It was wrong, but he thought it. One of the woman's friends has told CNN that the woman told her about the first incident in Halpern's office. She said her friend told her sometime after the incident that Halpern had pressed his genitals against her while she was seated in his office, but did not recall being told about unwanted touching during subsequent visits or the alleged propositions for sex. Okay. A third woman, also a former ABC News employee, told CNN she was on the road with Halpern when he propositioned her. I excused myself to go to the bathroom, and he was standing there when I opened the door, propositioning me to go into the other bathroom to do something, she said. It freaked me out. I came out of the ladies' room, and he was just standing there, like almost blocking the door. Can't even go to the bathroom. Got to have a secret, undisclosed location for bathrooms now. A fourth woman who, there's a good reason for unisex bathrooms, by the way. He could be standing there thinking she's coming out next, and instead it's somebody else who realizes what's going on and punches him in the face. But, actually, another woman could just come out of the bathroom and punch him in the face. I know a lot of women who would be really good at that. No bathroom issue involved in that at all. Bad thought. All right, moving on. We'll reject that one. A fourth woman. And remember, there are at least 5 here. Fourth woman who worked with Halpern and was junior to him told CNN he once asked her late at night on the campaign trail to go up to his hotel room with him and that she believed him to be propositioning her. She declined. Okay, good. Hopefully that's the end of that one. The fifth woman who spoke to CNN was not an ABC News employee. At the time of the incident, she alleges she was not comfortable sharing specifics of her story for publication, but said Halpern, while clothed, again, placed his erect penis against her body without consent. Don't do this, people. The women who spoke to CNN said that they did not report Halpern's behavior to management either because they feared retribution, given the level of power Halpern had at ABC and in the industry, or because they were embarrassed. And that's one of the main factors in all of this, too. Even when it's not a situation where you could lose your job or be threatened, it's just embarrassing. Right? I paused. I wasn't even assaulted by this guy. And I'm pausing, telling you what's in the CNN report. Everybody knows it's there. Everybody knows what he did. They reported it. It's a medical term. Why can't I say it? Because it makes me uncomfortable just to tell you. And then, of course, it's Mark Halpern's penis. So that's even worse. Anyway, of course they're embarrassed. In some cases, their fear of him and the sway he holds remains to this day because, of course, his power remains to this day. So no surprise there. Time coming up now for our second break. We're still not through the Halpern article, though we're almost there. The woman in the first account, however, said she told a mentor at ABC News who said he wanted to escalate the issue to management, and it's unclear if that ever occurred. Well, we'll continue with this story and the dissection of our entire society, I guess, after this next break. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show. Entirely about the Mark Halperin article somehow today. I don't know. I mean, I think it's working out. I apologize to those of you who thought you were going to get a roundup of news articles of all sorts, but I don't know. I think we're pulling in a lot of different strings here. And I guess if there were more shows like this and more discussion like this, I guess we'd be better off. I like to think so anyway. And a couple of other people think so too. More comments here, and I guess this means we're doing it right because we're getting a lot of comments today. Annette, Lady Annette 5 is the Twitter handle here, includes this comment. I think older women have been conditioned to look at each case while younger women see the bigger picture that is being violated. I guess that could possibly be true, and I guess that, maybe that comes, do you think we were conditioning women that way, or is that kind of what comes out of not having all of these stories shared in a way that illustrates that it is pervasive, and then by the time we finally began to realize that it's a pattern and that it exists everywhere, as younger women are growing up, they begin to see it. I guess it's I'm sure there's some chicken and egg stuff going on here, but what an interesting phenomenon and observation. It deserves more thought. A good point. Athena has a couple of others here, by the way. One saying, thanks for the slave reference, because in America today, people don't get that. Yeah, that comes up from time to time. I'm obviously not the person who came up with that idea, but yeah, it comes up most frequently in the context of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings. Another thing that we're supposed to, I guess, view as some sort of bizarro love story. But okay, that's out there. Also, she says, as a survivor, which I'm sorry to hear is the case here. I'm glad for the survival part, but of course it's the other part we're worried about. As a survivor, Athena says, when male coworkers would make attempts, as she puts in quotes here, I would ask, is that for me? And bring out scissors. Still upsetting. I mean, even when you make it clear that, one, I see you and I know what you're doing, and two, I openly acknowledge that I would be entitled to stand my ground, perhaps with violence if necessary to meet this violence. It's still upsetting. Even if you vindicate yourself that way, it's still upsetting because it's upsetting to have that happen. And that's the amazing thing about it, is that if you were a black belt in karate and somebody did that to you and you kicked the living crap out of them right there, and your boss said, good on you, you're promoted, I love it, I love that gumption you've got there, young lady, whatever. I like your moxie. I like the cut of your jib. Has anybody cut a jib lately? Any of you? No? All right. Anyway, imagine that, right? It's still, I guarantee you still go home and are crushed about it. Maybe you cry about it, maybe not. I don't know. But you still say, I have a this is the 15th guy I've kicked the crap out of at work. I'm an executive vice president now. They love my moxie so much. Everybody knows that I do this. And the thing is, people still do this to me because it must be like hopeless. What am I going to do? I can't escape the planet, right? It's going to continue to happen. That bothers me a great deal. I guess our societal norms, our entertainment norms, for instance, are quite different. For the boys, all you got to do is you punch a bully in the nose, and then everybody knows not to mess with you, and then he lives happily ever after because he punched one bully in the nose. Women, though, well, where eventually a new guy is going to come into the office. And of course, he's going to press himself against you. Yeah, you'll have to kick the crap out of them all. We're going to back you up 100%, but there's never any inkling like, you know what? We're just going to make it so this never happens again. Because you can't. Because I'm glad I work alone. I guess. This is not. I'm sorry, everybody, that you have to deal with this. Karen has another comment here. Many older women have seen it and experienced it throughout their careers. Yes. And find Andrea Mitchell's tweet reminiscent of how power reacts. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how old Andrea Mitchell is, but I know she's been around forever, so I assume that she's among the group that you might think has become, I don't know, numbed to the whole thing, but worse than numbed, brainwashed into thinking like that's gonna happen. So don't worry about it, or there's nothing you can do about it, or I don't know. Wow, man. It's dismaying. And we didn't get to any of the other news today. I still haven't finished the Halpern story, which is also kind of unbelievable. I guess we'll do that because I think there's only a few paragraphs left here. Where we left off saying that the women in the first account told a mentor at ABC News who wanted to escalate the issue, but it's unclear if anything ever happened about that. CNN's investigation, and I guess it's not unclear if it ever occurred because ABC News denied that there was any reports, though they could be lying or unaware of the reports because they were later purged or God knows what. So I guess that's the best thing you can say is unclear if that ever occurred. That's true. I guess that's a good reporting instance there. CNN's investigation found that Halpern allegedly exhibited this type of behavior from the 1990s to the mid-2000s. It's not his fault. The Revenge of the Nerds said he should do it. CNN has not learned of any incidents after Halpern left ABC News. Is Halpern married? Do we know when he got married? I'm curious about that. That wouldn't stop most men. They continue to harass people anyway. Some people don't. Some people genuinely think, they're idiotic and perverted, I guess, but they think this is how you get married. I don't know. Happened for Luke and Laura, right? I grew up as a teenager. I saw that. He raped her, blossomed into romance. He married her. Once I get one of these women to agree to sex, maybe we'll get married and then I don't have to press myself against other women because I'm an upstanding individual. I'm married now. I have morals. I think that happens. CNN's investigation, found this happened as far back as the 1990s when he first began to accrue power and through the mid-2000s. Halpern joined ABC News in the late 1980s. In 1997, Halpern was named political director of ABC News and rose to prominence with the advent of The Note, a morning digest newsletter previewing the day in politics. The Note became a must-read for industry professionals, and it catapulted him to the upper echelons of the political scene. And then, lo and behold, as soon as he was catapulted into the upper echelons, we began to hear about him pressing his lower echelons against others. Halpern left ABC News in 2007 for Time magazine, whatever, and joined Bloomberg in 2014 for a reported salary of $1 million. I would love to have that, and I wouldn't even press myself against you. At Bloomberg, he co-anchored With All Due Respect, I guess that was ironic, with journalist John Heilerman. The show was simulcast on MSNBC for a period. Halpern also found great success at writing books. In 2010, he co-authored Game Change with Heilerman. The duo later published Double Down, Game Change 2012, reportedly receiving a multi-million-dollar advance, after which he began to advance on others. Halpern and Heileman are currently working on a third installment about the 2016 election. Don't do it. For the last 11 years, I have had to watch this guy find success in every other news organization, one of the women who said she experienced harassment told CNN. There you go. The allegations against Halpern come weeks after Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein was first publicly accused of sexual harassment and assault, allegations that have prompted multiple police departments to launch investigations, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts to expel him, and his firing from the company he co-founded. Weinstein denies all allegations of non-consensual acts, it says parenthetically. While the allegations against Halpern did not mirror the allegations against Weinstein, not a mirror, I guess, but Anyway, the fact that the women who spoke with CNN have chosen to do so now does reflect the larger discussion in entertainment, media, politics, and other industries since the Weinstein scandal began. Yes, true, good. Women and men are talking about things that have been long been rumored but have never been brought to light. Some people are feeling emboldened to tell those stories now. I think that's good. Others are looking back and regretting the things they didn't do. And that's good in a way, too. In a way. And it's also horrible for the people who, didn't speak up because it happened to them. But that could also, by the way, refer to people regretting not speaking up on others' behalf. And also, I hope that it's part of the healing process, even for people that were victims. They look back and regret things that they didn't do and realize I need to do something about that. and help other people not have that problem in the future. One person who formerly worked with Halpern told CNN that while they were not aware of the extent of the alleged harassment, they believed they had heard enough to warrant reporting the whispers to management. In retrospect, I was such a coward, the person said. I wish I had said something. I wish I had done something. It is hard. It's tough. It's upsetting to realize that you should have done something afterward. Here's maybe, is anything unrelated anymore? I don't know. Something else I tweeted out today. Twitter is life for me, apparently. I have all my discussions this way. Something I tweeted out, retweeted, that I thought was really kind of interesting. This is the most tangential of relationships here. But the coward thing, and I wish I had done something, thing rang a bell for me just a second ago. It was a video that was being tweeted around. It's gone, viral at this point. Where is it? Let me scroll down and find this thing. It was a Burger King public service announcement. Who you find everything in the strangest places. I don't know how they distributed this thing. It's 2 minutes long, so it probably never got distributed anywhere. Josh Goodman was the person who originally tweeted. I don't remember who tweeted it into my timeline. He's just a dude who's a student at University of Missouri, I guess. Burger King, he says, Burger King just released one of the best anti-bullying PSAs I've ever seen. Here's the setup. It's a 2-minute thing. They got a couple of actors, kid actors, to act out a bullying scene inside a Burger King restaurant. Why? I don't know. Because they did. And they're bullying this kid, and they're filming the other customers observing this bullying going on, but not speaking up and doing anything about it. In parallel, I get presumably actors who are working as posing as behind the counter help at Burger King. This is what they did. They saw this kid being bullied, and they saw customers not doing anything about the bullying, and so then they took Whopper Juniors. The setup was just to make it clever like language. There was a high school junior being bullied, and then a Whopper Junior being bullied. What do we mean by how do you bully a Whopper Junior? The actors portraying the counter help, the prep help at Burger King, preparing Whopper Juniors that had been ordered by real customers, and they mutilated the burger. They punched it, and it fell apart. And then they scooped it into the little paper thing and they served it to people. And then the idea here is people are watching this kid get bullied, and we're bombarded all the time with you got to step up and say something and protect kids who are being bullied, right? We all learned that. And it's rarely applied. They're watching this kid get bullied, and that they have nothing to say about. They can't stand up even to a teenager. They can't stand up and say, what are you doing? Leave this kid alone. Get out of here. But they got served a burger that was ripped apart. And these same people who can't do anything they approach the counter full of righteous indignation at their burger being mutilated. Some a little more aggressively than others. And they're outraged that this is happening, and they demand that something be done about it. But no demands about this kid who's out here being bullied. Although the context is a little weird. Like if I went to a Burger King counter employee and said, I want to report that there's some bullying going on here, they would be like, I don't know what to do with that. I got no button to press for that. Am I authorized to do anything? What do? Do I tell the manager? The manager is likely about 2 years older than me, and he's not going to want to do anything either. You're supposed to step. The real context is, I guess you're supposed to do something, not report it to Burger King. I guess you could call 911 if you think it's really super serious or something, but the cops are never going to come around, not in time to do anything. It's supposed to fall to you, and that's uncomfortable. And I say they wouldn't even stand up to a teenager. And by the way, this is like a relatively clean-cut looking teenager. There are lots of teenagers out there who I would think, you know what, I could get stabbed or shot standing up to that. There's some cases in which this could be a real problem, right? And it's embarrassing and it's weird. But we're taught that there's nothing embarrassing or weird about going to a Burger King counter employee and saying, my burger is a disgusting mess. I'm entitled to do that. This other bit is a little more ticklish. I have a clear line of authority here. I'm the customer, and the customer's always right. Over here, intervening between a bully and his victim, it's not quite so clear. A cop has a clear line of authority. You probably don't. So it's a very ticklish thing. But it was a good illustration of, like, you know, you have righteous indignation over a hamburger, but not over this. It was very interesting. Mind you, there were people who did stand up, and you'll see in the end of the video that some of them did. And by the way, what I saw, I don't even know if I ran through the whole thing. Now I'm going to have to share this one with you. I'll do it. You'll see it. The two customers that I saw that actually did something. One was an African-American guy, and one was a white woman. And again, guess what? The bullied minorities said, you know what? And women aren't even a minority. What are we saying? They stood up. They did something. And maybe there were others too, and they just chose those two for diversity's sake. I don't know. But it was a very interesting illustration of what was going on here. And it happens. I mean, you know what? If I saw it in a Burger King, I'd be like, oh, Jesus, what am I going to do here? This teenager might be able to beat the crap out of me. How do I handle this? There's clearly something has to be done here. We can't just sit here. This case of bullying was so obvious. It was like, this is getting in the way of everything here. Somebody's got to do something. Kid wasn't getting hit or beaten, not violently, but he was, he was being assaulted, obviously. So I know that I would have that feeling. What am I going to do with this? But on the other hand, if the problem was a mutilated hamburger, I know what to do with that. So I'm going to go do it. And I can understand that. And it's a bad feeling. But it's out there. But you know what? Here's a personal anecdote I'll tell you about bullying. I know this. I know that my kids have been taught about, I'm going to have to genericize this as much as possible. Been taught extensively about bullying in school and to reject it. And they just had to wear orange for anti-bullying day. And they forgot. They didn't wear the orange. But anyway, lots of anti-bullying education going on. And particularly, there's additional anti-bullying education going on in their Boy Scout troop. That's part of the Boy Scout curriculum now. And I can say this. An incident occurred in our troop in which everyone was present to witness an actual incident of bullying. And it was dealt with appropriately in the end. And it was an adult leader of the troop who essentially, you know what? He got mad at a kid who was being extraordinarily disrespectful, I think, at a very sensitive time. But during the time that this adult leader was speaking to the troops, not the troops, the military troop, this Boy Scout troop. And this kid, whatever. He couldn't shut up. He couldn't sit still. And it was a very serious subject being discussed. And it pissed this guy off. And he got mad and he grabbed the kid and he hauled him out of the meeting and stuck him out in the hallway and said, if you can't control yourself, you got to say. Meanwhile, you can't put your hands on a kid like that in any situation, but certainly not in the Boy Scouts where we're supposed to be. And we are extensively trained as adult leaders that you can't do that. And okay, he lost his temper and he's been a great leader for a long time and he's done wonderful things for the troop. But eventually the troop leadership had to look at this objectively and say, you broke all the rules of our training. We have to separate you from the troop. And this guy was valuable. He'd been with the troop since forever. He was the Life to Eagle counselor. He's training Eagle Scouts. And it was just this momentary thing. But I mean, there's no time limit. Well, you only assaulted that kid for 10 seconds. Out of an entire lifetime of service, that can't be disqualifying. Yes, it can. It has to be. You're protecting kids here. But what was really amazing to me was this was obviously bullying. He's an adult leader. He's a big guy. And there's a small kid. Well, a young kid. I don't know whether he was small for his age necessarily, but he's a young kid. He's a Boy Scout. Whatever age. Doesn't matter. He's much younger than this guy and smaller than this guy. And he physically grabs this guy and kid and hauls him out of there. And that was meant to be intimidating. That kid was supposed to have the crap scared out of him. And so were the others. How dare you do that? This will happen to you was the implication. Should you disrespect me this way? And although the adult leadership and the executive committee dealt with it properly, you can't be part of this troop anymore. and reported it to everybody in case you weren't at the meeting. And I was not at the meeting, and that's how I found out about it. So I can't give you the total details about all of this stuff, though I did hear some of it secondhand. But in addition to it ended up being like, well, this is a tough thing. We have to separate you from the troop, and you've been so good, but we have no choice, and this is the right thing to do. And I support that. That was the right thing to do. You got to be tough on that, right? In addition, not a single member, I didn't expect any scout to stand up and intervene, but an adult leader present at that meeting could have stood up and said, this is just wrong. Why don't you let go of him? Why don't you go outside and collect yourself before this gets any worse? Right? They could have done that. They didn't do that. And when I asked about it with some of the kids and asked some of the parents, what were your kids' reactions? None of the kids identified that as a bullying situation. Only after we asked about it did they say, yeah. I mean, that is. He's a big guy. He's in a position of authority. And in a way, I guess they sort of thought about, well, you know here's ironic for you. In a way, they kind of thought, well, that kid was kind of asking for it. Well, that's a loaded phrase now in this context of this show, this crazy ass show we've put together for you. He was asking for it. Amazing. And we understand kind of, in a way, how you could come to that conclusion. But just as interesting was the fact that these kids who had just been through their anti-bullying training and were in a special setting where they chose to be subject to that additional training. And they chose to live by this code of, the Boy Scout law and the Boy Scout oath and everything. And okay, I don't expect any of them to stand up and intervene. But even after the fact, did you think this was a bullying incident? You know what? I really didn't. Because that's what, I don't know, big adult guys, leaders do. He wasn't going to take him out in the hall and sexually molest him, right? No, but you're not supposed to put your hands on like that. Not supposed to threaten that way. Yeah. But kids live their whole lives under that threat, which is another societal problem, a gigantic one that deserves attention as well. Men not doing so good in terms of standing up and looking like upstanding citizens in today's show. Typical liberal, right? Anyway, other things have happened today, as it happens. We didn't get to most of them. I rarely cite Keith Olbermann for anything, but it turns out I'm no longer blocked by him. So I guess when people retweet him, he shows up in my timeline. Here's an interesting thing. Some good news, totally unrelated, I think, to this theme of the day. Juliet Kayyem, who, CNN analyst, among other things, reports that, Keith Olbermann says that Juliet says that Trump Russia is so close to Oval Office, Mueller will report by Thanksgiving. Wow. Well, this is a report. Let's take a look at this link. What do you think? Do you think that's going to happen? Or is that just wishful thinking or what? This is from WGBH News, Boston Public Radio. The story says, Juliet Kayyem, Mueller will deliver on Russia investigation before Thanksgiving. I was not expecting that. National security expert Julia Kayyem is predicting, there we are, news from Robert Mueller's Russia investigation will be announced within the month. Oh, could be anything. All right. I think it's safe to say that before Thanksgiving, something's going to drop with Mueller. She said on Boston Public Radio today, the pace is too much right now. I do feel that. Every 12 hours, we're dealing with a piece of this story at a pace we haven't seen. Kayyem was prompted to make this prediction by the buzz surrounding a story about how Hillary Clinton's campaign funded what would eventually become the famous Trump-Russia dossier that surfaced in January. Yes, that's the actual big story of the day that more people are talking about. Fox News, I guess we can squeeze this in before we finalize today's show. Fox News and their allies and Republicans all over the place are doing their damnedest to turn this into either a he said, she said story or Dems do it too. Everyone's to blame, yada, yada thing. Or even worse, as I saw Ari Fleischer try to do today, turn this on its head and say that the fact that Democrats paid for the final product or for continuing the work on the Trump dossier, the Steele dossier, that itself is not only an indication that they do everything that they accuse Republicans of, but that it is itself signs of collusion with Russia, which is just an insane interpretation of things. The idea that now we're now at the point where paying a spy, a former spy, to report on what Russia is doing is collusion with Russia. That's the very opposite of collusion with Russia. I spied on the Russians and I found out that they're trying like mad to gain as much influence as possible over the Republican nominee who may in fact become president of the United States and put us in a very, very serious national security situation. Oh, really? How did you learn that? I talked to Russians. Aha, say Republicans. Collusion with Russians. No, the very opposite of it. It's a warning about someone else's collusion with Russia. But they say, but you paid to get that done. Yeah, like we pay CIA officers all the time to get that stuff done. But apparently, yesterday's story was that the journalism, parts of the journalism world were aghast that the particular Democratic operatives who paid to have this dossier work continue denied for a time that they had done just that. And so it's the cover-up. The cover-up is worse than the crime. It's not the crime, it's the cover-up. All of a sudden they're finding that to be the case. That's actually even a little less tenuous than the idea that Ari Fleischer has come up with, which is that telling us what Russians are up to is collusion, which of course only means that Fox News telling us that this was the case, telling us news about Trump-Russia, even if it implicates Democrats, well, I'm sorry, you told us news, and Russia's in it, so therefore that's collusion. Fox News, you're eliminated from the discussion. You just called a magazine a clip, and I'm sorry, you don't understand anything. So I guess that's good news. We got them out of the picture. There was so much more going on today that we couldn't get to, but I drew a lesson from yesterday's massively popular, in terms of downloads, show, and just said, we're going to wing it, and we're going to dig and dig and dig and dig a huge hole, and we're never going to get out of it on one single topic. So we're banking it all on this one topic, and it's a hell of a topic. It's connected to everything else in the world. So I guess we'll see. We'll see whether we do just as well. If we do, I'll be shocked. But anyway, luckily for you, because you are a Netroots Radio listener, you can rely on the guys on the after show to bring you all the headlines that I ignored in favor of lingering for 2 hours on Mark Halperin. There really were a bunch of other interesting things. It's going to be a hell of a show tomorrow, I am sure of that, as we try and catch up on everything that we didn't get in there today. Wow. All right. Let's see if we can't get that preview screened up here. Is that a real word? Screened up? In other words, to get it on our screen so that we can read it to you. Here we go. Let's scroll on down. It's going to take me about 10 minutes to scroll down. Little pinwheel spinning. Here we are. Thank you, Wink and Justice, for giving me the preview for the Thank God It's Joe Vidi episode of the After Show. Los Angeles police are arresting people for speaking 20 seconds longer than their allotted time at public city hearings. It sounds like a pretty good use of their time. Maybe they're looking to hook up, I guess, afterwards. They'll arrest all the attractive women and then see if they'll consent to sex while in custody. The Alabama elections chief wants to send citizens to prison. Everybody's trying to get people in prison. Send people to prison for 5 years for changing political parties and then voting. I wonder which direction they're changing. And a Georgia election server is quietly wiped clean the day a suit is filed against state elections officials. That's going to look pretty odd. For the last half, they report that a 10-year-old immigrant girl is detained after armed border agents stopped the ambulance taking her to emergency gallbladder surgery. And ongoing threats to Representative Frederico Wilson's life are preventing her from casting votes in Washington. Where's the Secret Service protection for her, I wonder? We'll get to more.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Looks like they got a little thematic thing going on in the after show as well. A whole half of the show about strange violations with respect to jailing people for exercising their civil rights, and the second about the continued victimization of women, no matter how old they are. Stay tuned for a heavy show next.